Hey, welcome back to the Secret Underground Lair. So today we're starting on the second of two Julia tables. Actually, I've taken a couple steps already. This time though, I'm going to do things a little bit differently on the legs, and that's where we're going to start. The last table that we made, the legs were simply straight. This time I'm going to taper them a little bit so they're square at the top, then they'll be rounded with the Bedrail Router Lathe. And I'm running this up on a slight taper, so they're going to be a ½ inch narrower at the foot than they are at the top. We'll start simply by getting these round. So we have a little bit of a flat spot here and a little bit of a flat spot here. Tiny flat spot there and a tiny flat spot here. But we're coming along very nicely. So I'm going to go down another, I've been going down 1/8 of an inch at a time, which is basically taking 1/4 of an inch off the whole diameter. So I'm going to go down about a 1/16, thereby removing 1/8 of an inch. And we'll be pretty close to our final cut. And on the router, I am using a flat 3/4 inch blade or bit. You can see it's still just a little flat there and a little flat here. So I might go a little bit farther. I'm going to measure the bottom of the foot as well. I want that to be 1 inch. The top should be 1.5, but it's going to be a little bit less than that. So I set my calipers to the width of the leg that I have down there, and what I find is that I'm still off by about 3/16 of an inch from where I want to be. So I'm going to come down lower the router another 1/8 of an inch, sorry, 1/16 of an inch, and that should get us, I'll probably call that close enough. I'm not looking for perfection here. There's going to be a little bit of sanding yet, so that'll take a slightly bit more off, but we'll go down another 1/16. Okay, that has given us just exactly what I'm looking for up here at the top. We've got perfectly round right here at the junction of the square. Now I do have to come back with my rounding bit here just to gouge that out and make it a nice transition from square to round. And we're at the right distance on the base, so we're ready to sand that. Okay, I just swapped out our flat bit for a little round nose bit on the router, and we'll do that little section up at the top of the leg to do the transition from square to round. And I'm going to reposition the camera so you can see what I'm doing there. So that little bit of routing gave us a nice transition from round to square. A little bit of sanding left to be done, so remove the router. I'll just spin the leg now and go after it with some 80 grit sandpaper. We'll do the fine sanding later. And I think that'll be good. So that gives us a nice little tapered leg. I'll mount the other two legs in and we'll go through the same process on those. So here are the pieces that we have so far on our second Julia table. Got the three legs done here, and they have a nice little taper on them. 1 inch at the bottom and about 1.5 inches on the top. Our top and bottom for the table, I've marked out roughly where the rounding is going to be, although on the top side I'm going to make that 3/4 inch wider, just to account for the ability to butt up against the wall and keep away from baseboard. And the blocks that will be cut into the doors on the table. I thought I'd take just a second to show you what I did on the Bedrail Router Lathe to enable me to do tapers. So on this end, kind of the idler end of the Bedrail Router Lathe, I have made the bit that holds the end of the leg in a slot. Now I cut that slot so that I can slide that up and down. When it's in its lowest position, and I've marked 1/4 inch increments here, but when it's in its lowest position, it will be parallel with the driven end, meaning there's no taper at all. So I have this now set about 1/4 inch above low, which means that there would be a 1/2 inch, the leg on this end is going to be 1/2 inch narrower than it is at the top. So I could have gone another 1/4 inch and made it 1 inch narrower. So just by 1/4 inch increments, I've put that in there for future reference. But just by setting it off by 1/4 inch, I now have a 1/2 inch smaller leg at the bottom end than I have at the top end. So that was a simple little adjustment to the Bedrail Router Lathe to allow me to do tapers. Okay, next operation on the Julia table. I cut the top and bottom off on the bandsaw. You saw me do that on the last Julia table that I did. The difference on this one though is I left 3/4 inch here to account for the baseboard on the top. So the pieces are upside down now, but you can see that they fit together nicely. And I'm now getting ready to cut the pieces for the doors. So from the blocks of wood that I had, I now have them set up here on the table saw, and what I want to do is get, you can see these pieces are all kind of ragged. What I want to do is get a nice clean edge here so that when I set this up on the bandsaw, like that, to cut the arc for the door out of this, I want this to be setting nice and stable, and right now it's just pretty catawunkus. So, is that the right word? It's a word. I'm going to use that word. So I'm going to run this through the table saw, bring the blade up about halfway, run it through this way, flip it over, and run it through again. The bed rail mounted here in the middle of the piece allows me to get that straight up against, or flat up against the surface of the fence like that, because this surface here is not exactly even either. So having run it through the saw to get this surface square, I can then flip it over and get this surface square. So that's what we're up to now. So now that I have this surface nice and flat, I'm going to put this surface through the sawmill, or through the table saw, and that gives me a nice smooth surface on which I can draw the line that I'm going to be cutting on the bandsaw. Okay, got two good surfaces, so I'll go do some markup. So to get the curve that I want, I'm simply laying the, in this case, the bottom of the Julia table on top of this block and tracing the outline. That gives me the outside edge of the door that I want. Now I also want to have an inside edge. And if I use the same curve here, I know that it's going to be a little bit thicker in the middle than it will be on the outside. So I'm going to see if I can come up with a way to kind of get a, rather than a 14-inch radius, and see if I can get a 13¼ inch radius here. Back in a second with the jig. Just made an executive decision here. I'm going to use the outside edge actually after it's been cut on the bandsaw as my guide for doing the inside edge. I can simply, use my finger trick, or perhaps more professionally, I'll have an outside edge like a caliper and just kind of go around that way, or a compass. So I'm going to mark that inside edge after I've cut the outside edge. So I'm going to go an inch, and here I'm using my little compass. Remember these little compasses that come in a little Staedtler protractor compass set that you got in school? How old are you to remember that? Okay, so I'm just going to go with that measurement. Now I can trace that all along the edge. And that gets me the mark I'm looking for. Not 100% perfect, but this is close enough. So having made that mark, let's run it through the bandsaw again. And in case you're wondering, and probably you've already guessed, this is very soft pine, so I can move pretty quickly through this wood, and it creates a very fibrous, fibrous sawdust. It's quite amazing how it builds up. All right. And there's our blank door ready for the arcs. All right, so there's our second door blank cut. Oh, I tell you, cutting that stuff is like cutting in a blizzard with the way that sawdust comes off. It's just incredible. This is the same tooth that I use, same blade that I use on the work table sawmill. So it's a 3 tooth per inch 3/4 inch blade. I probably should go through the whole blade now and just kind of clean it off with acetone just to get rid of the resin that's present in this wood. Anyway, there we are. Door blank cut, or both blanks are now cut, so we'll set these up to go through the arcs. I have made a couple of minor improvements since the last use of this. One is I've replaced the wooden blocks with these 3D printed blocks that provide a little bit of rigidity here so that there will be less chance for the sled to rack here. And it's a precision fit to get the rails, so it's a nice smooth operation. I've made sure that the table here is parallel to the motion of the arc, so that'll help. And I've provided a little bit of adjustment. I made the holes that hold this piece onto the table a little bit larger than the screw size, so there's a little bit of adjustment that I can make before I clamp it right down. So I think I have this put in quite well, probably as well as I'm going to get it. And I'm going to make our first pass using a 3/4 inch straight bit just to provide a perfectly round surface on this piece. So first pass, just a really light pass. So I'm pretty happy with that pass. Just took a little bit off here and a little bit here. There's still a bit of a flat spot in here. So what I'm going to do is use my pencil and just kind of mark the whole surface. And then that will tell me where, if I have any high spots or low spots rather. Kind of the equivalent of a guide coat. All right, and we'll drop down the router bit just a little wee bit and take another pass. Okay, and that pass is done just what I want. It's given me everything, it's taken everything off. I think we are ready now to start doing some bead work. So I'm going to need to take the router out, put in the bead bit, put in the guide to give us our stopping points. Yeah, so a little bit of setup work and I'll be back when that's ready. All right, I have the arcs now set up to do some bead cutting and a couple other changes that I've made to improve the process. Now I have a knob in here so that can be easily turned and tightened and loosened. And there's a little kind of clamp mechanism back here to hold the head of the bolt, almost like a little wrench. There's also a flange washer in here, kind of a big lock washer between these two pieces to bind the two pieces together. And I have recalibrated the scale here on the arc so that I'm going to go 14 millimeters. These marks are 14 millimeters apart. And I'm expecting that because I'm just a little bit higher up, we'll wind up being closer to 15 millimeters when we cut the arc on here. Maybe not exactly, but we'll be close. Also, in terms of the router bit itself, I have it just going to make a couple passes. First pass, and then I'm going to lower it down a little bit. I have a scale on the router here that'll tell me where I want to be. So I'll start playing around with that to figure out how deep I want to go. So I'll make one pass, drop it down a little bit, make another pass, drop it down a little bit, make a third pass if necessary, and then move up to the next one and cut that. So we'll start with 2 test beads down here at the end and see how that works out. Now I apologize if that camera angle doesn't work out, but we'll try it there and all right, I'm going to come down a little wee bit. Or not. Okay, that's making a good cut. I like the shape of that bead, so we'll move up now. Taking a look at that bead, I think that's what we're after. I'll bring you in for a closer look. So that's giving us a fairly wide 15 millimeter, almost 15 millimeter, very round bead. That's much more what I was looking for. The first Julia table, we had them very close together. So I think this is going to be a much nicer look. So I'm going to go through the whole side this way and I'll bring you back when I have that door done. And that's the finished door. I am really, really happy with that. This worked out just, I couldn't have expected more. Beads are very consistent. They're the width that I'm after. They're about 15 millimeters apart, maybe slightly more than that, but they have a really nice rounded look. So some sanding on them will be, of course, in order. Couple observations. One, having this little knob on for making the adjustment and the little lock washer that's between these two pieces, game changer. That just made the thing really much more effective. The router worked really well and I made, as I was going through these, I actually made 3 passes on every bead. On every cut rather, a quick shallow pass, a mid pass, and then a final cut. So a little tedious, but I'm just overjoyed with the result. So I'm going to call that a video for today. I still have the other door to do. And then once, of course, the doors are done, then they got to be cut to width and then assemble the table. So our next video will probably be picking up with the second door finished, fully beaded, and we'll get on to assembly of the second Julia table. Thank you very much for watching, everyone. Like and subscribe.